Now, I know that video and this part 3 slide says that we're basically talking about Isaac now. But we still have Abraham on the earth. We have not finished his story yet. And there have been many sermons about the calling of Abraham and his faith to leave when he started out in following God. But it's also important not just to start well, but to also finish well. This is a time where Isaac is continuing the promise, but the patriarch is still breathing. We can't just pretend like Abraham doesn't exist. We can't just let him fade into obscurity. We have to talk about his finish line faith, how he ended well. I know that's not a conversation that we like to talk about, how you end your life well. But that song we just sang, that he is with you when you're coming and you're going, that's not just like when you go to the Harps grocery store. He's with you when you come into the world, and he's with you and you're going from this world. And so how can we have the type of faith that honors God as we reach the finish line? How did Abraham end his life of faith, and what can we learn from that? We're in Genesis 25 today, and this is where we pick it up. Abraham had taken another wife because he had just buried Sarah, and her name was, hold on, my eyes are not working so well. There we go, Keturah. And she bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Midan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. So everybody say Shua. Bless you. Okay. These names are pretty fantastic. What's Abraham doing here? He had all of this time struggling, trying to have this promised son. And now he has 6 more. And is Abraham doing that thing that he did before with Ishmael? And he said, man, I'm not getting this child of the promise. I better try to take matters into my own hands. And I'm going to have a son through my wife's servant. And that started a whole mess. Is he sort of hedging that bet? Like, what if Isaac doesn't follow the promise? I better have 6 more backup plans. Isaac's plan A. And then this is plan B, C, D, E, and F. Is that what he's doing here? Or is Isaac not just being abandoned by Abraham? Is he actually doing something a little more? It might help Isaac in this land, in Canaan, if he's got a little family around, if he's got some half-brothers, if he's got more friendlies who can connect their lineage back to Abraham. And some of these names are going to come up later, even in Genesis, like Midian, for example. We're going to get to a guy named Joseph. He had that coat of many colors, and his brothers were all jealous, and they threw him in a pit, and they were trying to figure out how to kill him without getting in trouble with their dad, as if God wasn't going to see. And then there was a band of Midianites who were traveling down to Egypt, and they said, hey, let's just sell him to the Midianites as a slave, and then they can sell him off in Egypt. There's Midian. It will come up again in Exodus, the next book after Genesis, because Moses, the Midianites helped take the Israelites down into Egypt, and then Moses, when he comes out of Egypt, he's going to have a father-in-law named Jethro. He's a Midianite. So the Midianites are part of this whole family lineage of Abraham. So what is Abraham doing? He's not just saying maybe Isaac isn't going to cut the mustard. He's saying, I'm going to try to clear a path and give him a few allies. So Abraham came from as far as the Mesopotamians from the east. He had a son, Ishmael, from as far south as Egypt, where Hagar was from. And now he's populating the area. He is completely shifting the geopolitical landscape, sort of making a path for Isaac to fulfill the promises and enjoy the promises that God offers. So we know also another way to confirm that he's not just hedging his bet against Isaac is that in 25 we read that Abraham gave everything he owned to Isaac. He had children with his concubines, and he sent them off to the east and said, you're not the children of the promise. You're great and all, but you need to go away because Isaac is the one who has everything. So Isaac has a wife, some potential allies. He's got the dirt that is deeded in the promised land to his name. Abraham is looking forward to the future and the promise that Isaac needs to succeed in embracing for his life and for his children and their children and their children on to the next generation. Abraham had a lot of ups and a lot of downs, but he did not give up on his faith. Not even in the up times, because sometimes we can have such a great, God gave us this blessing, and then we can forget about God. You can say, God, I'm going to follow you because I really want this carrot that's in front of me. I would like this son of promise. And then the son comes and you say, thanks, God, I don't need you anymore. I got what I want. He didn't give up on God just because he got Isaac. And he didn't give up on God whenever things were seemingly testing his faith. How am I supposed to sacrifice this son? Through all the ups and downs in his life, he continued in faith with God. And this is what we read. At the length of Abraham's life was 175 years. He took his last breath and died at a good old age, old and contented, and he was gathered to his people. Your version, especially if it's NIV, may say that he was old and full of years, which seems a bit redundant. You're old and full of years. That's not what that means. That Hebrew word there, contented, really means satisfied. He was old and happy. It's important to have those two together if you can. Because I know some people that are old, but being satisfied with what God has done in their life, it seems to be eluding them. So being old and being satisfied are two things that go well together. So let's start first with being old. Now that seems like a very simple concept. I don't feel old, but yet when I tried to read that one word suddenly at the back of the screen, that's the first time that's ever happened. I was like, that's a little blurry. So I guess I got to schedule an eye doctor appointment. That happened. I just aged in front of you all right now. IRL, okay? I'm going to change the setting of my iPad and make my words bigger. I don't know. Old seems like something like, I think I understand old. You don't understand old. Like all those kids down there, they think they understand old. They don't know old. When I was a youth minister, I'd take kids in the van, and then they'd say, Mr. Dwyer, how old are you? And I'd say, well, I was like in my 20s. I was like, how old do I look? This kid goes, 50? And I was like, stop, get out. You're walking home, I don't care. No. You can still feel young, but then you start hanging out with people younger than you, and you're like, I'm not young. And then people younger than you hang out with middle-aged people, and they think they're old, but then they don't quite. And suddenly, what's the phrase? You're only as old as you act? Something like that? You're only as old as you look? No, you're only as old as you feel, right? Well, Methuselah, we're just a few chapters removed from in Genesis where people were living multiple hundreds of years, right? 969 years for Methuselah. So compared to that, Abraham is just like in the prime of his life at 175. Why don't we have a view of age and maturity where we say you're only as old as your faith? Not as old as you feel, but as old as your faith. When I was a kid, I went to an amusement park in Kansas City, and I was fascinated to see that there was this young man. He was probably in his 20s. He was older than I was. I was a teen. And his job was to stand at this cross section on the path between people going to roller coasters, and you could give him $5, and he would try to guess your age. And if he got it within a few years span, he got to keep your $5. But if he got it wrong, he still got to keep your $5, but he gave you a 10-cent stuffed animal back, and so you felt better about yourself, right? Total scam, right? I saw through it. But I thought this was bold because I saw these older ladies that were coming up, and they were saying, how old do you think I am? And I was like, this is a brave man, right? Because his job is to be really good at guessing women's age. And some of these women felt like their job was to be really good at hiding their age. And so I decided if I ever had to get that job, I would just give away all the bears, Even if she was 60 or something, she came up, I'd be like, you're 25, here you go. Have a great bear and a great day. Feel good about yourself. Is there a way that we can look at somebody's faith and guess their age of faith? Oh man, you must have been following Jesus for decades because you're so mature. Your age and maturity and your faith. We have these phrases that we say for kids. We say, man, you're so mature for your age. When's the last time somebody said that about you? And your faith in the Lord. It would be so awesome to be like 80 years old and somebody say, man, you are so mature for following Jesus for 60 years. I would have thought that you were even more mature in your faith, that you have been following Jesus for longer. We have another phrase that we say. We say to kids, hey, you need to start acting your age. When's the last time somebody encouraged you lovingly to start acting your age in faith? If you've been following Jesus for 10, 20, 30 years, what's my age again? You're only as old as your faith. So that's what it's like to be old, in Abraham's case, to be mature in the faith. Now let's shift to what it means to be satisfied, to be content. In the ancient book of Proverbs, known as Proverbs, we read this little nugget. The fear of the Lord leads to life, and whoever has it rests satisfied. It's the same word that describes Abraham at the end of his life. He will not be visited by harm. Now, that does not mean that trouble and problems will not find you. It means that trouble and problems will not overtake you, because you are satisfied with the Lord in your life. So you can be mature no matter your age, and you can be content no matter your circumstances. No matter what's going on in your life, you can still have satisfaction that the Lord is everything for you. This verse does not mean that bad things will never happen. That is a health and wealth lie. It's easy to be satisfied when everything's going your way. You know what you call people who are only happy if they're getting everything they want? Brats! Spoiled brats. If you had a different word in your mind, you may need to repent. But anyway. Abraham faced many challenges in his life. He didn't get everything that he wanted. He had to wait for some things. He did not have a perfect life, but he had a full life. God's protection of you does not depend upon your perfection. I'm going to say that again because I think sometimes you may have heard or just picked up from some churches somewhere that, man, if you do right, then God will bless you. And if you're doing wrong, something bad, you must have been doing something. God's probably punishing you for some sin, or you just don't have enough faith. So I'll say it again. God's protection does not depend upon your perfection. It's because of his goodness. Abraham wasn't called because he was great. Abraham was called because God is great. And to have the Lord is to have everything, even if everything that you have is the Lord. In the New Testament, a young man named Timothy would have a mentor named Paul. He wrote a lot of letters that we have for our New Testament. And Paul warns Timothy in a very personal letter about chasing earthly riches that do not satisfy. Because then you just keep pursuing more and more of the world and feeling empty. And this is what he says: godliness with contentment is great gain. There's that godliness, that maturity, that aged faith. But you also have to have that satisfaction. And the godliness is key here. You have to decide if you want to just be old or if you want to be old and satisfied. Godliness brings contentment. Anything else breeds contempt. You'll start to have bitterness fill up your heart. But whenever you start pursuing the Lord and let him fill you up, you'll find that no matter what happens, you are able to endure. That's the verse in Philippians where it says that I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. That's not just, man, I got to roof the house, I got to get these honeydews done. I got to, the baby's crying again. I can do all things through Christ. No, that's not it. It's about being so satisfied that the Lord is all you need, that you realize he has already provided everything that you need, no matter what's happening around. Godliness brings contentment. Anything else will only leave you in contempt. There's a tattoo that sometimes makes its way around popular culture. It's in some references in movies. It's called No Regrets. The problem with that tattoo is you better make sure you get a really good tattoo artist who makes no mistakes, because that sucker is permanent, and you may have a couple of regrets, like these, for example. Running out of room. No regrets. Didn't space that out well. How about no regrets? I regret nothing. No regrets, not even one letter. Awesome. Now, I have no ink on me, but I couldn't help but notice as I was Googling the tattoo, no regrets, I even typed in on an old person, just to see. Now I get it, older people aren't necessarily that down with tattoos, but there were very few wrinkles on the arms of the people that said no regrets, no real liver spots. I'm telling you, I wanted to get to 175 and say, it's time for my no regrets tattoo. It's time for my I'm satisfied with what the Lord has done with my life tattoo. We have looked at being old and we've looked at being content, and Abraham had both. Which do you think is easier? To get older or to get satisfied? Which do you think is better for you? Which do you think is better for your family? Which do you think is better for this congregation? Which do you think is better for the community who needs to know, to taste and see that the Lord is good? After the story of Abraham was now thousands of years old, there's a writer of Hebrews. He's writing to the Hebrews who understood Abraham's story, and he's reframing it in the light of what Jesus did here on earth. So he takes this ancient story of Father Abraham, and he says this: by faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed and set out for a place that he was going to receive as an inheritance. He went out, even though he did not know where he was going, and by faith he stayed as a foreigner in the land of promise, living in tents, for he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. I know it is hard to live a life that's characterized by being content when it feels like you're living in tents here in this world. You're a foreigner, you're in exile. This world it seems to conflict with your faith, and you don't know what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to feel that struggle. You're supposed to feel unsatisfied with this world because you and I are destined for another one. The world can make you feel like an exile, and you aren't comfortable here. That's okay, because Abraham knew that feeling. He realized, I'm not destined for this. I'm destined for a better, bigger architect place. It takes maturity to get this understanding. So what's your age? What's your age in the faith? Thankfully, it wasn't just Abraham who had this vision. Sarah had it too. By faith, even Sarah herself, when she was unable to have children, received power to conceive offspring, even though she was past the age, since she considered that the one who promised was faithful. She considered that the one who promised was faithful, even if she wasn't able. It wasn't about her abilities, but about God's abilities. Abraham and Sarah saw that God didn't just call them out of one place, that he would carry them through to the place that he needed them to be. And I don't know what this land has thrown at you. I know the promised land is going to be great, but this land, I don't know what it's thrown at you, what your life, what challenges you're hidden. I don't know what they are. I don't know what's causing you to maybe have a doubt about the promises of God. I don't know every situation that makes you wonder if God really is going to keep his word. For Sarah, it was being unable to have a child. For Abraham, it was not really having any descendants. I don't know which promises of God are looking fuzzy to you right now, if it's the promise of a new life, if it's the promise that he will never leave you, if it's the promise that he will strengthen you. I don't know your problems, but I do know that when you run into problems, the only way that you're going to get through them is you look at the one who promised. You have to look at the one. The promises are great, but when you see the person, and people make promises all the time. Politicians make promises. You can look at promises, and they can be nice, but when you look at the person who promises, that's how you get through your problems. Do not let Satan rob your joy. I say let Satan rob your joy, because he really doesn't have any authority to take it from you. He didn't give it to you. He can't take from you what he has not given to you. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Where does that come from? It comes from above. So it can't be taken by him. He's not that powerful, but he is deceptive. He deceives and he accuses, and he will convince you that you do not want the promises, and then he doesn't need to take them from you because you set them down. He did that in Genesis 3. Did God really say? Is he really good? Is that promise okay? I'll tell you what, why don't you just do it my way instead? And he doesn't have to be more powerful than God. He just has to get you to doubt your faith. And get you to set it down. But whenever you resist the devil, he will flee from you. He does not have more power. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. But you're not going to get through those problems all the way to a finish line faith at the end of your life, and you're going, if you start setting down the promises that God has given instead of having the type of faith that Abraham and Sarah had throughout their life. That's how you will find the end of your days, be they 175 years or 969 years. That is how you will find both maturity and satisfaction in the life that God has done through you. There is no other way. The writer of Hebrews continues to talk about this finish line faith. He says Abraham and Sarah are mentioned with a bunch of other Old Testament figures that you probably learned about in Sunday school and your flannel graph and VBS, pop-up events and all of that. And those are wonderful, but the writer of Hebrews packages them all together as these witnesses. He says, therefore, since we have such a large cloud of witnesses of faith surrounding us, let us lay aside every hindrance and sin that easily entangles and ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes where? On Jesus, the one who makes those promises, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. You can keep your eyes on the finish line if you want, but it's better to keep your eyes past the finish line. Now, I'm not much of a runner. I kind of believe there's this verse in Proverbs that says that the wicked run away even though nobody's chasing them. So if you're just running for the sake of running, I don't quite get it. I think it's slightly evil, but you do you. But this is my understanding of people who run official races, is one of the most important parts of finishing is you have to give every last bit in this burst as you finish and to get yourself across that finish line. You don't slow down before the finish. Abraham did not slow down. Even toward the end of his life, in his faith, he pushed forward. Until the end of his days, he trusted in the promises of God. And may it be said of us that we are keeping our eyes on Jesus. In Oregon, there was a high school track meet. Now, I usually don't study much Oregon high school track, but there was a video going around that I thought was hilarious and fit in really well with finishing well, crossing the finish line with everything that you have. A girl had a commanding lead, but then something a little unusual happened. Take a look. In case you didn't see that, commanding lead, she fell down and then starts somersaulting across the finish line. Now, I've lost a lot of races to people on their feet. Imagine losing a race to somebody. Well, I don't know. She was just doing the boot, scoot, and boogie. I don't know. She got herself across the finish line. But I love this image right here, this moment where she has to decide, I've fallen. I didn't run this race perfectly. What do I do? I fell in front of everybody, in front of my friends, in front of my family. Do I just lay here and take it? She credited her creative thinking and her history in gymnastics. Like this inner 4-year-old just came out and she was like, somersaults, just go. She got across that finish line. When it seems like you've tripped up, at any point, it could be toward the end of your life. Some of you are more toward the end. Some of you may feel in your life like you're more toward the middle or more toward the beginning. It doesn't matter where you trip. It matters if you start going forward with everything that you have. What if you stumble? What if you fall? Fall forward. Stumble into the loving arms of God who is cheering you on. He didn't come down to earth and then go down into the earth through death just so that he could say, I can't believe you fell. We're done. He says, get up. Continue. Go through the finish line. It would be great if you do this last burst of energy and you go through and it's a wonderful photo finish. But you know what they call somebody who goes first through the finish line on their back? Winner. That's what they call them. So yeah, it'd be great if everybody had the photo perfect, Wheaties box picture of you finishing. Even if you're stumbling right now. Finish forward. With every energy bit that you have. Crawl, roll, flip, flop, do the worm. I don't care. Whatever it takes to get past that finish line, because we have a faith that is worth finishing. The faith worth starting, and if you haven't, today's the day. But it's definitely a faith worth finishing. Not just a faith worth sharing. Sharing your faith is great, but do you know how much damage and confusion and chaos it causes in the spiritual lives of people if you share your faith boldly, but you do not finish your faith? Whether that's our Christian culture that tends to make these popular icons of Christianity, and whenever they show their humanity and they fall, or it's a personal faith hero of yours that lets you down to not finish your faith well. But whenever you share your faith and finish your faith, that's a true life of faithfulness to God. So perhaps some of you today are right here. This is a hard spot to be. I'm sure that fall hurt. I have never in my life have I jumped as high as this person or been as fast as this person. I have fallen standing up and it hurt. I can imagine all the momentum probably hurt when she fell. But don't stay there. Don't stay in your pain. Don't stay in your problem. Fix your eyes on the Lord and let Him fix you up and continue to run the race with perseverance. You and I may fail, but the Lord never fails. He will never fail you, so you can get back up, and the crowd is cheering you on. And I'm not just talking about the heroes of faith in Genesis, or that made it all the way into Hebrews chapter 11 from your Old Testament. What if the people who were running the race with you here also cheered you on? And if you fell, they didn't say, "Come on, man, you got to do better." What if they said, "I'm cheering you on. You can get back up. We can do it." What if there were a great cloud of witnesses at this congregation? And when somebody fell, we were able to go forward with one another. Maybe your race hasn't started yet. Maybe you haven't decided to follow Jesus. And maybe you think that Jesus is great, but His followers not so much. Don't let the imperfection of those who are in this state at various times in our faith, don't let them and their imperfections keep you from following the one who is perfect. May it be said of us, like this verse in Hebrews about Abraham, that we are looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Do you have a finish line faith like Abraham had? Consider the work of Jesus and His sacrifice when He said, "It is finished." Because His race is done and His race is won, you and I can continue through the end. Let's stand and pray together. Lord, we are in awe that you could live a perfect life. We're also in awe that you would die a terrible death for people like us who have not been perfect in this race. Lord, I pray for those that are feeling like they're jumping over hurdles through life. Maybe they're flat on their back, they're feeling the trip. They feel a lack of contentment, even in old age, however old we are. May we find our satisfaction from you, because we know that even though this world really doesn't have anything to offer us, we know that you are good. You can do good things even in this broken world. We pray that we would be available to do good things in your name through this world so that more and more people would join us in the next.